And the Oscar goes to?
Olivia Colman.
And the Oscar goes to, this name I can't pronounce, Alfonso Cuarón.
The Oscar goes to Green Book.
Green Book has 5 Academy Award nominations this year, winning 3 Oscars: Actor in a Supporting Role, Original Screenplay, and Best Picture.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Awards Watch Oscar podcast. It's the final Oscar podcast of the 2018-2019 season. It's the day after the Oscars, and this is the post-mortem wrap-up. I'm your host, Eric Anderson, and I have with me for the first time, and I'm really, really excited about this, New York-based film critic Tomris Laffly. Hello.
Hi, Eric, and hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm even more excited that the season is over. Yeah.
I think we are in agreement on both of those things. Tomris, where do people know you from that are listening to right now?
I frequently contribute to RogerEbert.com and Time Out New York, and I tweet from @Tomris Laffly. So if you've heard of me, it's probably through one of those places. I also contribute to Vulture and Variety from time to time. And again, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and I think anyone that knows me and listens to this knows you. So it won't be a surprise, but it's really, really great to finally have you after all this time. All right, let's go right into it. We're going to talk about the show last night and what we think about it, host free and everything, the awards, the good and the bad. But we're going to start a little bit by talking about the season, because I think for each of us and for any of us that really get into the Oscars and follow and track and do all of this, know that this was the wildest and strangest award season in recent memory. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've been watching the Oscars since I was 5 years old, and I've really never seen anything quite like the level of controversies that didn't end up mattering that I think would have in the past. Do you think that some of the controversies that happened this year that seemed to have no impact would have just taken any other movie out a decade ago?
I mean, I've been thinking about that myself. Looking at some of the winners yesterday, if you exclude Best Picture and some other categories, there really was an amazing amount of diversity and different voices that we really didn't hear from in the past being supported. So I think that was one of the good things that happened this year. But in terms of the controversies that happened around Bohemian Rhapsody and Green Book namely, and I'm assuming you particularly mean those two, it didn't really have an effect. And I probably think that it would have even had a lesser effect in the past. So maybe he would have even won more awards, but I'm not going to lie, I was so surprised by how triumphant both movies were yesterday. And for the record, I like Green Book a lot less than obviously the Academy, but I don't really hate it as passionately as many people do. It was still my least favorite movie that got nominated. And Bohemian Rhapsody, it was fun, entertaining. I found some value in it, but I probably lean slightly more positive than a lot of his detractors, but I still didn't want either of those movies to receive as many awards or even nominations as they did yesterday. But I still feel that a decade ago, the controversy still wouldn't have derailed these movies. Maybe they would have even came out even more triumphant, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. What I was trying to think about when thinking about these two movies and the types of controversies that have come about. And the last one I was thinking of was, strangely enough, the last time that Universal Pictures won Best Picture, and that was A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah.
And there were some similar things where the story in Green Book has been hit with, accusations of inaccuracy, and for A Beautiful Mind, that happened the same way. That so much was fictionalized that it, turned it into something else. But that was kind of it. Other than Russell Crowe's, phone throwing, there wasn't really there wasn't much else. But it did remind me of that a little bit, which is why it just is still so surprising that both of those films, Green Book and Bohemian Rhapsody, were able to completely transcend those. And I think what we heard from some voters was that those scandals and controversies actually bolstered the voters.
I can definitely see that happening. I mean, look, a couple of things. The first thing is perhaps a little opposite of what you were saying. The first thing is we really keep thinking and talking and analyzing amongst ourselves on Twitter and elsewhere. But at the end of the day, if somebody really loves a movie, they love a movie. And most of these people, or at least a part of these people, a big part of these people, are not necessarily as plugged in to every single thing that's being talked about and written about these movies. So there's that thing. And on the other hand, there's definitely the more defensive thing that you're talking about. You don't get to tell me what to like. You don't get to tell me what to do. And I'm still going to vote for what I like. And actually, you know what? If you're telling me what not to vote for, watch me do that. There's definitely that hardening effect as well. But what we found out that, and especially when the guilds started handing out their awards, these movies really, both of them are liked within the industry to a degree that, resulted in their wins yesterday. It wasn't necessarily aligned with what we thought on Twitterverse or, other places that we were discussing our opinions.
Yeah, and I know that we get accused of living inside the bubble of that conversation of film Twitter and all of that, which is completely valid. So I think it's important to try at least to look at the race outside of that bubble. We are not voters. We can talk to voters, but that isn't going to give us really a larger perspective on how a race is going. It's really only in the aftermath that I think we can really look at things. And what I've sort of come to this season, after again doing this for so long, is that I'm becoming less interested in the prediction element of it, and much more in the hows and whys. And so today, being the day after the Oscars and having all of the information now in front of us, it's the way that we disseminate it and the way that we look at it that I'm just much more interested in now. I like, despite how I feel about the winners and losers last night, I'm going to enjoy looking at this in the future in how I talk about stuff and how I talk about the Oscars, and including making sure that I don't feel like the things that I say are having an impact. I can't pretend to think that that's where, you know, any power lies. We are just talking, you know.
Indeed, and you know that actually even creates maybe the reverse effect that we were just talking about. The more
Yes.
we feel like we have an impact, or we kind of have that power to sway things, maybe the more harm we're doing to these things, you know, by naming frontrunners early on, by naming the movie you should be voting against early on. It's a lot more interesting probably to, you know, help support the movies that you want to put your name behind, and also watch the race unfold in its organic shape.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, we saw yesterday that's what happened.
I want to ask you if you noticed something that I feel has kind of jumped out this year, and that was that everything from pundits to critics were much more vocal about the things that they liked and the things that they didn't like, myself included, as anybody that follows me knows. And that, for one of the first times, turned into a bit of a battle, and it became like pundit against pundit in an argumentative way that was much more volatile than before. It was a lot less friendly this year. Would you agree, or did you see that?
I agree with that to a degree, and I think there are a couple of reasons behind it. This is not the first time this kind of battle, pundit against pundit or critics against each other, happening.
Sure.
We've seen that in the year of La La Land versus Moonlight. It just really became almost like a political discussion of where you stood, you know, between those two movies, defined who you are as an individual. But I feel like there was a great Mark Harris piece a few weeks ago at Vulture that he was breaking down this year's nominees. You know, on one hand, you have something really old-fashioned and maybe a little bit antiquated in its way that it approached America and its race relations, like Green Book. And on the other hand, you had something like BlacKkKlansman. And these two movies really represented how polarized both the Academy is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is a reflection of how polarized the country is. So there is definitely something to be said about why the conversation was a lot louder this year, because the films definitely were a lot more polarizing. Because at the end of the day, La La Land is still a good, harmless movie, no matter where you stand. But when you have something that people really, really objected to, like Green Book, competing against something that defined the status quo for a lot of people, like Black Panther or BlacKkKlansman, the conversation is bound to get more heated. That's inevitable. But there's also the obvious effect of everybody is a lot more vocalized and entitled to their opinion, using more social media more frequently, and there is that escalation happening as well. So I have noticed that happening more, but it wasn't necessarily because people were necessarily turning against each other. I think that was bolstered by the slate of films in front of us. They were really, really sitting at the opposite ends of the spectrum, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And before we started this podcast, we were talking a little bit about, you know, pieces that we're trying to write about the race and about the show, and you know, struggling to really kind of to hit what we wanted to hit. And that's, I'm looking at my piece right now, and I don't even know if it'll be out at the same time as this podcast is. And that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm looking at an Oscar race that was really beginning to mirror the United States politically and socially. And certainly since the 2016 presidential election, that discourse has changed. And taking sides is not really just the norm now. It is we're digging our heels in desperation to hold on to something, and I think that is true with people and their politics, and I think it's true within the Academy, because the last 3 years, after those 2 years of Oscars So White, of 2014 and 2015, the Academy made their really valiant push to diversify the membership. And we have 1,400, 1,500 more members than before, more than that, 2,000, which is huge. Yeah, which is huge for a group that, started at 6,000 just a few years ago. So, and then we saw The Shape of Water and Spotlight and Moonlight be a result of that. And then something happens like what happened last night with Green Book winning, which I know for some people is a wonderful win. For some people, it's a really regressive win. And I sort of feel like that it is the old guard of the Academy getting very nervous and very worried about their stature and their place within the Academy. The same way that we're seeing that happen, again, in the country and politically, where people that have not had a voice before have a voice and they're using it. And I've never seen the Academy more at odds with itself than this year and with this result.
I've been nodding through with agreement with everything you said in the last couple of minutes. I mean, on one hand, I don't want to necessarily make a statement and say only this type of person in the industry or within the Academy likes Green Book, because there's danger to that, and I also think that it's inaccurate. But on the other hand, what you're saying is absolutely true. There is a part of me that thinks a good amount of people in the Academy were holding on to a very conventional and sort of feel good for white people type of movie like Green Book. They were holding on to it for dear life, and this might be the last time I'm giving a chance to this kind of movie that used to be the Academy movie once upon a time. And it won. They prevailed.
It's funny because every year we get these phrases like this is an Oscar bait movie and this is an Oscar movie, and it's such a antiquated phrase, because what we've seen recently are the opposite of that, and so this is what it feels like. This feels like A Beautiful Mind and Driving Miss Daisy, and the kind of movie that was super comfortable and easy, PG-13, right down the middle, very safe and very careful.
Right. It almost reinstated the kind of Oscar movie that I had falsely thought maybe went away, but it looks like it hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
But I also want to ask you a couple of things.
Okay.
So Roma, for anyone who follows me anywhere on social media, would know that it was my favorite movie by far and away this year. But I'm wondering what you think. Had there been no preferential ballot, would Roma prevail? And had there been no foreign language category that a lot of members knew where Roma was going to win, would Roma prevail in Best Picture? Those are the two things that I'm really, really wondering. Those are two things, like one, preferential ballot, and how was Roma kind of slowed down in its Best Picture bit by the fact that it was always going to win foreign language?
I do, to the first question, I do think that it would have won on a plurality ballot.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that it would have. That also would have given us winners like La La Land and The Revenant instead of, Moonlight and Spotlight, which is not saying one or the other. Those I like all of those films, but just as that's what would have happened, because it would have been like how voting used to be. It's why we see so many director picture splits now, and no film having any sweeps anymore, because things are just so different.
Yeah.
To the other question, yeah, I have to think that if there wasn't a foreign language film category, it would be different. And Alfonso Cuarón himself basically said that at the Spirit Awards when Roma won for international film, because it's the only category that it can be nominated there. He was, making a plea and a wish for a time when there won't be a need for that category, which I think
he actually said a version of that at the Academy Awards yesterday, and I really, really appreciated that. He said, and that's something that I sympathize. I'm Turkish. I moved to the United States when I was 22, so I'm not from here, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But he said he grew up watching foreign language movies like Citizen Kane and Jaws. So it was sort of a version of what he said at the Spirit Awards, and I really appreciated that.
I loved that part of his speech so much, because whenever there is a conversation of foreign language film, even that phrase itself is a bit of a misnomer, because that's putting the baseline at American films.
Right.
And it's
defaulting to English language, which,
it is. And that's like making the default, for something male, or the default white. And it's because we've done that for so long. And I know a lot of critics organizations, instead of saying foreign language film, that category is non-English language or film not in the English language, which I think is an attempt to redefine that phrasing in a really good way.
I completely agree. I always wonder myself why Academy isn't embracing that title more than calling it foreign. There's such a weird otherizing in that word foreign.
Yeah.
Especially about an art form that's supposed to do the opposite of otherizing people.
Exactly. And if if you're going to have a category like that, then why wouldn't it be like it is at the Spirit Awards, where non-English language films can't compete in the rest of the categories? It's almost, I understand the legacy of that category at the Oscars, but it's also one that's been fraught with, its own controversies and weird voting and limitations by country and submission and all of that I think lock it and ghettoize it into a category that feels very dated.
True. I mean, on one hand, I don't want that category to go away necessarily, because it still brings some value from all around the world. All these submissions, people see non-American or non-British movies they don't necessarily get engaged with. So there's still value in that, but maybe there is a way to transition it to a place where it feels less of a ghetto within itself.
I completely agree. I think we can sort of segue that into, because any changes like that would have to happen within the Board of Governors and within the groups and branches. And I think we should talk a little bit then about what happened with this Oscars telecast leading up to it, and the truly mind-blowing number of faux pas that were totally unavoidable or totally avoidable by the producers and by the Academy president, John Bailey. It started in August of last year,
right.
when, sort of out of nowhere, they announced that they were going to create a popular film Oscar that was going to compete in this year. And they did it without any parameters, any requirements, or without any way of any of us knowing what would qualify as a popular film, whether it was box office or a select committee, anything at all, which was their first mistake, I think, without coming, with the total package of here's what it is. It immediately sent, again, film Twitter and social media and everybody into a tizzy of just being really angry. And most of us felt like it was sort of a direct comment to and about Black Panther, which had made $700 million and was really huge. And I know we're going, all the way back to there, but I want to ask you if you think the idea of the introduction of that category was because the Board of Governors felt that Black Panther would not be Best Picture nominated, and they were hoping to just hedge their bets by getting it in there?
I think there is definitely a part of that in their thinking. They were really, really fearing that it would be discluded, and then there was going to be a big controversy surrounding it. It kind of reminded me of when I think Dark Knight was left out of the Best Picture field. Next year they expanded to 10 in order to just stand in the way of that kind of thing happening again. It almost felt like they were trying to do that proactively this time around.
Mm-hmm.
But it was such a horrible idea. And I have to say, I have been watching the Oscars probably for nearly 3 decades now, since 91. And I have never been this upset with the Academy, because every time they tried to introduce something, it was not necessarily thought through in detail. It felt like we were actually watching them think out loud, putting opinions out there and walking back, as opposed to proposing something that was really worked out in a way that that should have been. Popular film category was a terrible idea from the get-go, because it was minimizing the legacy of what Best Picture meant. Sure, Best Picture doesn't usually go to the best picture of the movie, however you define it, but it still has a legacy. It has some classiness behind it. And it also created this really terrible notion that a film that is widely liked by everybody isn't always Best Picture material, or can't ever be Best Picture material, to put it more accurately. And I really hated that notion. And it became even funnier this year, because when we look at the Best Picture nominees, you see something like Black Panther, and then you also see something like A Star is Born, that was also a big hit. So separating those two things, best film versus popular film, was really an insult to films that would compete in either category, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think we can look to the introduction of the animated feature category and what happened when the preferential ballot took over after the first 2 years of solid 10 nominations, where now we haven't had an animated feature nominated for Best Picture. And I think...
Sorry,
go ahead.
I have to say, I am less against having a separate animation category. I'm less against having a separate documentary category, because I do feel that while those shouldn't be included from the Best Picture race, there is a different kind of craft that goes into both nonfiction filmmaking and animated filmmaking. It's nice that they can actually compete in a widened way. I see what you're saying. It's, in a way, it's ghettoizing, but it makes more sense than splitting feature films into popular versus Best Picture, but maybe not so popular.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And I think without animated feature and documentary feature and foreign language, as it is still named.
Right.
Without those categories, we would likely not see the representation of those films in other places. And, even though people like you and me see most things, a lot of people don't. And it will be just the name, seeing a name of a film is going to be their introduction to it. And it might spark their desire to look it up and see if it's something that they want to see.
Right. But to also go back to your original question, whether they were trying to introduce that popular film category with a proactive fear of Black Panther being excluded, we talked about that. Yes, I think there was that element. But also there was this other element that with all their decisions, first with this popular film, second, they also wanted to not air certain categories live during the show and then cut down the time. They were really trying to win over this fictional audience that they thought they're not necessarily into the Oscars, but if we make it shorter, if we make it a little bit more cool for the kids, popular, maybe more people will tune in. And I don't understand that thinking at all. I mean, when you step outside of the film bubble, somebody who is not interested in the Oscars or film industry isn't going to all of a sudden start watching it because there are 4 categories being aired during commercials or there's a popular film category. That's not going to make me turn into a Grammy watcher all of a sudden, for instance, or I'm not going to be interested in football all of a sudden if they make changes in the way they air the sport. But Academy was coming from a place of, our show is broken, let's fix it. And for a lot of cinephiles and Oscar watchers, it was not broken to begin with.
Yes, I always think that, whether you are talking about something like the Oscars or talking about a company or retail or anything, if you're in management, the concept of dismissing your core in order to gain new people is almost always a bad one. It almost always fails. And to use your comment about football, the Super Bowl has its halftime show, and there are tons and tons of people that if the halftime show performer is somebody that they want to see, they'll tune into that. They won't tune into the rest of the game because they don't care about the game.
Indeed.
And the idea of trying to bring in more viewers is not a bad one, but the way they went about it was terrible because it was attacking the core of what the show is about.
Right.
And it was just dangerous. And one thing, although we talked a little bit earlier about impact and, social media and film Twitter having impact or not, this was, I think, an example that started very grassroots and then became very, very big once the film industry itself completely pushed back on it.
Yeah.
And I was really, really happy to see that from all angles. But the thing that was really, I guess, unfortunate is that although they relented and changed, the producers were shocked that there was pushback. They were shocked that there was backlash at anything. And it really it pointed to how out of touch they were with their own audience and their own industry.
They were really coming from a place of, when you look at all the decisions that they have made, they were almost coming from a place of not respecting their own legacy as a show, as an academy, and not necessarily embracing what makes people tune in year after year after year. They were just coming from a place of, I would go as far as saying that disliking what the Oscars have represented so far, and let's just kind of rock the boat and then throw all these things away and then start anew. And I'm so glad, like you were, the pushback happened, because hopefully now they understand there is a legacy, there is a real history behind this thing that people actually care about. It turns out tradition sometimes isn't really a bad thing, and it is valued. And I hope these are the lessons they take to heart when the new board of governors or whoever the new president will be. I think it won't be John Bailey anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong. I hope that's the learning that they take away. We weren't really opposing to change. We were opposing to change that sort of tried to override what was good about the show all these years.
I know, and I have to say the thing that surprised me and disappointed me the most is that the Oscar producers were not, like pulled out from another industry as a fixer that didn't know anything about entertainment and movies and the Oscars. These were people that are Oscar winners and Oscar directors that know and have benefited from it. They both have. And it was the strangest kind of, well, I have mine now and you don't get to have yours. It was that to me was the most disheartening element of it, because if they had just pulled a business executive out to, a CEO from a huge company to make all of these crazy decisions, I could see the thread of that, of them being out of touch with an industry they're not a part of. But these were people that are in the industry, and that was heartbreaking to me.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that they walked back, because that's something I give them credit for, because it's sometimes not easy to just say, okay, we've been wrong, and let's walk back on what we have messed up. So those couple of things, both cancellation of popular film, I hope they don't bring it back ever, and deciding to air all of the awards live, those were good decisions to walk back on.
Definitely, and I think we can go right into talking about the show now too, because we saw so many fantastic speeches, and primarily from some of those smaller categories that I think would have been so unfortunate to have these tiny abridged versions of them without it. And I also too want to talk about each of our thoughts of not just how the show went itself, but what the show was like without a host. I think we each have slightly different opinions on it,
right.
Which is good. So I want to ask what you thought about the show without a host. Was it smoother or was it rudderless?
I just think, first of all, the show was really well produced. I'm not going to deny that. Everything worked like it was supposed to. As you said, we had some great moments, some great impromptu moments, some fantastic speeches. The shallow moment between Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, it still gives me shivers. It was amazing.
Oh,
but
yes.
it was so sexy. But I have to say, I'm not really a fan of the hostless show. They really, really do need a host. I have seen a lot of people on Twitter saying that, oh, this is good, they don't really need a host. But I really think that what helped them land on that conclusion is the first set of presenters we got were Amy Poehler, Tina Fey, and Maya Rudolph. And they did a great presentation. They kept reminding us that they're not hosting the show, but they did a fraction of what a host was supposed to do, salute some of the nominees, kind of banter with people a little bit, kick things off to bring the audience inside the theater together and then kind of bridge that with the audience in front of the TV.
Yep.
They did a little bit of that, and that's why people felt like the hostless show didn't necessarily go that badly. But, I mean, again, as someone who's been watching this thing for nearly 3 decades, when they presented and disappeared, I felt really cheated. I kind of wanted them to go on a little bit further, maybe bring in a couple of things about the Roma team and talk to more nominees and crack a couple of more jokes about what the Academy has been doing and what our current political state is or whatever the host does. And then I also noticed as the show went along, I kind of wanted them to come back and center us a little bit because there were so many great moments that were fleeting, and that's what I expect from a host anyway. I don't want to see the host every 2 seconds, but a great opening monologue of a few minutes, and then maybe come back 2 or 3 times during the show to sort of recenter everything and then move things along. I think that bridge between someone like me in front of the TV and everybody else in the Kodak Theater was missing. Everybody moved smoothly like clockwork, but there needed to be a character defined by who was hosting this thing, and I really, really missed it. Did things go wrong? No, but it could have been a little bit more personality-driven, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I completely agree that I think the producers were very shrewd and very smart by having Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, and Maya Rudolph open it, because it was an extended presentation, and they were absolutely the stand-in for the host opening monologue. And I think, like with many, many other people watching, we're just thinking, okay, why can't they just stay and host the whole show? That would be awesome. And yes, the host is like the gluten in bread. It's the binder that keeps each section connected to the next. So there were certainly elements that stood out where, you know, we would come back from commercial and sort of just then go into the next thing. And one of the great things a host does is just kind of set you up and prepare you for that. You know, you might have run to the bathroom and, you know, the commercials finishes and you have a couple of seconds with the host before you get into the next category. And so it was certainly missing those little beats in between. I certainly didn't miss the extended host bits. I was really glad to not have those. I thought that was one really big benefit from it.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can totally see that. But, you know, in addition to setting us up for what we're about to see, I also found myself wanting a host capturing what we just saw.
Yes.
It would have been amazing, for instance, after that amazing Shallow performance, if we had a host who kind of just spontaneously said something about what we saw between Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. Those are the little things that I miss, to kind of center you in what you have just seen, not what you're about to see.
True.
But it worked yesterday. I just hope that they don't necessarily think of this as, great, we don't need a host again ever, because I think we do.
Well, the ratings went up a teeny bit, but I don't think enough, you know, to make them probably do that again. I think the most glaring bit of where the lack of a host didn't work was at the very, very end, where Julia Roberts essentially had to close the show without realizing she was closing the show. And that's the job of a host. Yeah,
it was really clumsy and awkward. I agree.
Yeah, that was really weird. I have to say, as we talk about hosts and why there wasn't one this year, I have to think that next year, when they go out hunting for a host, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult to find somebody. What happened with Kevin Hart, who wasn't their first choice, he was their second choice, it tells me that what was already by many people's consideration a thankless job, I think they're going to have a difficult time finding somebody unless they can get Dwayne Johnson just to go ahead and agree with it ahead of time. But you got to lock those things in like 6 months ahead. These people work for a living.
I mean, you really do. You can't just go and hope that someone like The Rock is going to host the Oscars a month before the Oscars. I mean, the only thing I want to say about this host business is I just hope that whoever they find is somebody who actually likes the Oscars and who would like to host the Oscars. And by that, I'm thinking of a lot of people saying maybe Whoopi Goldberg is going to be the surprise host in the end. She had repeatedly said that she had hosted before. I know she had repeatedly said that she would be up for the job back in January sometime. So I just hope that they think along those lines instead of getting the shiny car, getting somebody who actually possesses some of that. I like this thing and I want to do it.
Yeah, I think all of us that are, invested in this are going to be watching very closely to see not only who the next president is, but who the producers of the show are going to be. Because, when the producers were announced, when Glenn Weiss and Donna Gigliotti were announced, my first thought was, oh, wow, this is great. Glenn Weiss has directed the show forever, and he had his own super great speech moment at the Emmys proposing to his girlfriend, and Donna Gigliotti's a winner for Shakespeare in Love, and this is going to be great. And then,
Boy,
were you it was, and then it wasn't. Yeah, so that's where it's going to come from. It's going to come from the Board of Governors elections and the producer. And I think, and I hope that they'll take the lessons from this year and turn it into something really positive next year. Because I think there were a lot of really good things to come out of this telecast. But I also think there is so much information now available to them to make wiser decisions. And maybe bring on some consultants that know what they're talking about and really like the Oscars.
Hey, I don't oppose to that because that's really half the battle. Don't go against your audience, don't go against your show. If your decisions are coming from a place of kind of contempt for what the show has been, as opposed to these were good things and now let's make it better, then you're bound to make some poor decisions and be pushed to walk back on them, like we've seen this past few months. I just hope that they do walk away with right takeaways from what has happened this year.
I think so too. That is certainly my hope, is that that's what the next edition is going to be. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the winners themselves, because I know, as we were mentioning, we had some, such an extremely diverse group of winners, more so than ever in Oscar history. And we can lament the wins that we didn't like, but I want to talk about the things that we really liked so that we can end this season on a positive note, because there were just some amazing, wonderful, deserved, exciting wins.
I completely agree, and sometimes it's easy to forget that this thing is about celebrating art and artists. It turns out at the end of every Oscar season, this vicious competition of name calling and shouting at each other on Twitter, but what it comes down to is really celebrating some really hardworking artists who made our lives a little bit better by the work that they put in to this art form that we love very much. And I think yesterday night, with some exceptions on my end, was a really great testament to that. I loved seeing Black Panther's costume design win, Ruth Carter. I'm not a big superhero film person myself, but Black Panther represented to a lot of people something much bigger, and she really created from scratch, looking back at history and thinking futuristically and taking cues from present time, a world of costumes that just really blew me away. And as much as I love Sandy Powell, she will always be one of my favorites. For me personally, seeing Ruth Carter being rewarded yesterday was a great moment. And I will say the same thing about Black Panther's production design win. That was also a phenomenal moment, and they just deserve those two awards in my view.
Yeah, those were absolutely two of my most favorites as well, and not, I mean, for so many reasons. The wins being the first for African Americans in that category is huge and outstanding, and I love it. And that is a wonderful way and thing to celebrate. But I also think what Ruth Carter and what Hannah Beachler did with their work was, like you said, it was informed and it was infused with culture and history, but completely pushed the envelope forward by also having to be science fiction. And I can't imagine, I mean, I'm just a white guy. I can't imagine what it must have felt like for some people in the Black community to be able to see that type of representation and how that would feel. I mean, I feel like that when I watch a movie where I can see a version of myself. We all do that. But I it's the thing to me that will always make me love the Oscars. It will always make me defend how important they are. And when people say things like, it's a bunch of rich people just giving each other trophies, I think they're completely dismissing the fact that some kid is at home watching this and feeling like, I never thought I would be able to do something that I wanted to do because I've never seen it done before. That is what it can, that's what it can do for people.
And to that point, yesterday, a lot more people, women and people of color from different cultures, backgrounds, were able to see themselves in the winners. But I also have to say, in the presenters too, there really was a genuine diversity on stage yesterday, both in the presenters and in the people who accepted the award. And the best part, I will just say this, it really didn't feel like kind of a box-ticking effort. Let's try to make this thing look more diverse so we're not criticized. It really felt organic. It really felt merit-based and earned, which made it a lot more rewarding. It really gave us a sample of the industry and the world we can aspire to be a part of. That was really my favorite takeaway from what we've seen on stage. Every moment felt like it was really organic. I mean, yes, it was then offset by Vololonga or whatnot, but when it was working, that's what I really celebrated. It was all very richly deserved and merited, and it just felt great.
I totally agree, and I definitely agree with your point that the diversity in presenters and presentation didn't feel box checky either, because what you had were people from films and representing films that had a wide range of success and visibility. And what that did, you had Stephan James, you had Julia Roberts, you had Awkwafina, you had people that were representing the actual face of movies. And it was very real. It was very palpable. And I completely agree with you. It didn't feel forced for a moment. And that to me was my hope of what the future of this industry is going to be.
Yeah.
Where, the reason why Alfonso Cuarón says something like, I long for a day when there isn't an international film category. That's kind of what he means.
Yeah.
Where we can get to a point where a conversation about diversity is a conversation of the past. And it's moving in that direction. And even though the Academy is clearly at odds with itself right now, as the spectrum of winners showed us last night, I still think that it is moving in a forward direction.
I agree. And another thing I liked is how subtly political the show was yesterday. I mean, it felt like they have gone to a place from needing to spell out the politics to sort of making the present politics a DNA of the message that they were going to give away. You know what I mean? Nobody had to say Trump this or etc., but with subtle sentences, there was politics and there was celebration of truth and there was celebration of diversity in everyone, but it was just embedded in the message that they want to give out so perfectly that you would blink and miss it. Like I really, really like that. Nothing had to be spelled out because everybody was on the same page in a way.
You're absolutely right, completely right, and I think that, and it's especially saying that it was in the DNA of the show, because that's exactly what it was. Yeah. And when something is that way, you're right. You don't have to spell it out. You don't have to act like you are dictating to the audience, which is justifiably one of the complaints that people have about the Oscars and the industry as a whole, where they feel like they're being talked to and talked down to and told what to think. When in reality, if you just show what a version of diversity and representation and strength and politics through all of those things looks like, then you have made your statement without having to make a statement.
Exactly. It was just political by design. You couldn't deny any of your political leanings when you just even looked at anyone or hear what they were saying, because it was just very much embedded in what the show was yesterday, which made the Best Picture winner even kind of funnier and freakier in a way for me, but that's a whole other story. But I'm looking at the list of winners right now. It's so funny. I don't know if that happens to you, but as soon as the Oscars are over, maybe it's because of the anticipation and overanalyzing month to month, I immediately forget everything that ever happened. I have to rewatch my DVR the next day to remember some of the things.
That's completely. I was at a very, very large party last night with 200 people. And
you know, justified my most hated scenario of Oscar watching.
Let me tell you, it was extremely difficult to do. It was not fun. I mean, I enjoyed being there. I was at a table with Buster Keaton's great-granddaughter, and that was actually the most awesome thing in the world. But Yeah, I lost so much of it, even though it is a communal experience to do that. So yeah, I'm right with you. I'm looking at the list of winners and going, oh my God, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse won an Oscar, and it just blows my mind. It's probably my second favorite win of the night. I was so happy about that. But yeah, I have to look at things again and sort of shake my head and go, okay, did that happen? And then I need to rewatch it in my own space.
But that happens to me even when I'm just completely isolated. What I do during the Oscars is I put my phone away. I don't want to look at Twitter. I don't want to watch it with other people. I just want to watch it with my husband and my dog. And I was really 100% paying attention, not necessarily talking to anyone. But even then, as soon as it was over, I just forgot. Let me go back and see what just happened. Going through the list of winners again, and another moment that I really liked, even though I didn't predict it, period, end of sentence, that documentary short winner. I thought that was just so lovely. The way they took the stage, and then someone said, a movie about menstruation just won an Oscar. It was so wonderful, and there was a lot of, diversity and joy, and in that moment, that is probably one of my favorite wins of the night. Even though it wasn't my favorite movie in the category, I loved Bow's speech for Best Animated Short winner. It was just, again, so lovely. There were so many of those moments.
Yeah, I always love the speeches of the short film winners. Always.
They're always the best, right? They should never get rid of those categories. They're always the best.
There are no categories that are more impactful to a young and hopeful filmmaker than the short categories. And all you have to do is look at those speeches to know that that is true, because they are the most excited, they're the most happy, and they have the most to gain by winning.
Right.
It's such a platform.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Yeah.
Although I do have to say, among the live action shorts, my least favorite movie won. I didn't care for Skin at all.
No.
But they were just so joyful. So I mean,
that was a rough category.
It was a rough category. There were really good movies in that category, but it was just a really tough fit, one after another. For the listeners who haven't seen them, 4 of the 5 movies are about, either child abuse or dying children. It was just so tough. And the last category, maybe a little bit more feel good in the tale it told. Mm-hmm. It was still about an old woman sort of failing in her deathbed. I would just say it was a tough fit. Back to back.
Yeah, I mean, I had predicted Marguerite to win just by virtue of the fact that it was the only thing outside of the other 4 that just didn't have such a dreary wallowing of awfulness.
I mean, funny, that's the only short category. I usually do really well on shorts, but this year I did terrible in all of my predictions. I'm not going to even tell you my number. But
I did not do well either. Yeah,
Skin is the only one I predicted correctly, because among them, it felt like the most Green Booky kind of movie. I don't know how to explain it. It was almost a movie on race relations, not necessarily done for anyone else but white folks. That's what it really felt like. And I went for that. I should have applied the same logic to Best Picture winner, but I didn't. I picked Roma. I thought Roma
I did too.
Prevail, and and it didn't.
Yeah.
You know.
I thought it was going to transcend and break all of the statistics, and it didn't. But here we are.
Part of the reason that I picked Roma, I mean, I don't know your reasons. I mean, I was kind of predicting it since Telluride, but those predictions aren't really valid. You're just kind of playing around with what you've seen. But it really felt like it wasn't necessarily a narrative forced on the movie. I think with whatever problems I have with their model, I think Netflix ran a really classy campaign about Roma. They've really done their best and put their best foot forward. But Roma wasn't that movie that was sort of slapped on a fake frontrunner status early on. I felt like it was a movie that won that frontrunner status more organically in time, slowly. It's really, the race really took that shape to Roma's favor, and that's when I started feeling a bit more confident that it was going to win. Because we saw that A Star is Born, when it didn't necessarily have anything going for it, people thought, oh, this is the front runner.
Yep.
But it was something that was defined by people predicting the race. And when industry started speaking, we saw that wasn't necessarily going to stick a landing as a narrative. That's when I thought, okay, maybe Roma really stands a chance, because if not Roma, then what? But I kind of underestimated, the portion of the Academy that really wanted a movie like Green Book too.
Yeah, and that's where something goes from, respect to passion. I mean, there's a reason that A Star is Born hit every single guild and didn't win any of them.
Yeah.
It was very respected, but you cannot win on respect alone.
No, you can't.
So there was much more passion behind it. I felt really good about Roma. My early predictions in the summer were for BlacKkKlansman, and then I switched over to Roma after Venice and Telluride and stuck with it all the way. And, I knew that it had more to overcome than any other film did. It had to create history in a way that other films did not have in front of them as an obstacle. Yeah. And even with the wins that it got, it still was able to make history. I want to ask if you think that the Netflix campaign for the film, and specifically the cost, was a turnoff to voters, even outside of the whole streamer element of it.
No, I don't think so. I think Netflix did what they were supposed to do with this movie. It was always about their movie, what makes their movie good. It was, unless I missed something, it wasn't about any other movie. And yes, they poured a lot of money behind it, but it's nothing other traditional studios haven't done in the history of the Oscars. So I don't think it was a turn-off. And I don't think the reason Roma lost has anything to do with Netflix bias. I mean, what this year proved, I mean, let's face it, Alfonso Cuarón still won 3 Oscars yesterday, and Period, End of Sentence is a Netflix movie, and in the past their documentary features didn't leave the show empty-handed, as far as I know. So we have seen that the Netflix bias is a bias until people see something they like that they want to put their weight behind. So I don't think there was any anti-Netflix thing happening yesterday.
I kind of have to agree with you on that. I mean, as far as the money thing goes, it's very clear that Roman needed that level of push behind it, because it wasn't the kind of movie that was easily absorbable for most people. So by having it at every film festival, by having Yuli Fabrizio Aparicio and Marina de Tavira at every festival, and meet and greets and Q&As and all of that was a crucial part of the visibility of the film.
Completely. And again, it's not something that wasn't done by other films, other studios in the past. And as you say, Roma really needed that, especially with their two actresses. Marina de Tavira is a screen and stage actress, but not really known in the U.S. all that well until this year. And Fabrizio Aparicio is a complete new actor, newcomer, so they needed to do everything that they did. And I, took my hat off to them. I think they did it perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. And I'm sure that some voters did have some Netflix bias, I can't think that the majority really would, because what Netflix is doing right now is the next wave of films. And if you want to work with great directors and you want to work on great projects, you need to be on the side of Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, at this point,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I feel like I, as a critic, have more distaste for that kind of skip theatrical and the streaming model than it looks like the Academy did, because also Buster Scruggs scored several nominations that many people didn't see coming. So I am no longer going to buy this. There's this wide bias against Netflix from the Academy. I think I am more critical of their model than it looks like the industry is. So.
Yeah, I mean, they did right by Academy standards and had Roma in theaters for not only before it started streaming, but for a long time after. So I think they did everything. They found the place where they could meet in the middle. I know Netflix wants to disrupt the industry tremendously, and they are. But they showed, I think, exactly the right amount of compromise. And where they were able to get with the type of movie that Roma is, I think then is going to make it easier in the future for films that are more, I don't know, let's just say English language or traditional.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully this doesn't put us off topic, but is Academy in the process of introducing some new rules or eligibility rules, let's say, for streaming movies?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like, what Netflix did for Roma, giving it exclusive 3-week theatrical run before it was up on streaming, was unprecedented. They've never done it before for any movie before, but I think Academy will probably require a little bit more from streaming movies moving forward, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have any insight to this?
I don't, but I think that's going to have to be the case, and I think because Netflix did that with Roma, that they've kind of, in a way, painted themselves into a corner. They can't go back now. If they want to have a movie that they're going to push as an Oscar contender, they're going to have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so what we'll see, the big test for that, obviously, is going to be The Irishman.
Indeed. And I am not, hopefully it will be a thought out eligibility rule, but I'm not against defining or trying to define those blurring lines between streaming and theatrical a bit more in the award season, because it really does open up these confusing questions. Okay, then what's a movie made for TV? And I am not putting down movies made for TV. Absolutely not in this day and age. But, what are Oscars for and what are Emmys for? I think these are things that we need to start thinking about. And I am maybe a little old-fashioned, but I'm not necessarily ready to get rid of that separating line between two platforms completely just yet.
Oh, I'm not ready at all. In fact, I want the
Yeah.
opposite. I think that is an important rule to have because
Indeed,
there's too
I
much
think it's
double
true.
dipping that already happens, especially with documentaries. So I think it needs to actually be much more strictly defined
Yeah.
and much less blurry.
Completely agree, and hopefully it will make our jobs a little bit easier too, and the Twitter conversations a little bit less painful. Because right now it's a little taxing to talk about the articles.
And I think it's going to make, a streamer like Netflix, I think it's going to help them too.
Yeah.
Because they'll be able to decide, and they did that this year. They decided, what movie was going to be their push. It wasn't going to be Bird Box, it was Roma.
Yeah.
And they can do that every year, just like any studio does, where they will pick out the things that they're going to really push for awards consideration. But what happens, and what a really good studio needs to do, is to really pick up when a film starts generating that level of consideration that maybe they weren't thinking about before. And it happens every year. And sometimes studios are really behind, and there's like, this is the movie that we want to push.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to flip pretty quickly to be able to jump on something that actually has momentum. I mean, Universal really did that very, very well when they jumped from First Man to Green Book. They saw it coming. And, switching that date to the release date to Thanksgiving was a huge sign of their faith in it. And they did. They were able to read some tea leaves and make changes. And any studio is going to need to do that if they just got to get it outside of their own heads.
And just for clarification's sake, if it's not clear to any listeners, no one's against streaming. We love streaming. I use it all the time. I rely on it. But I don't think it's unreasonable to say that you don't want theatrical to disappear. And yes, going to the theaters is very expensive. It's sometimes very painful due to various reasons, including some rude audiences and bad projection, but those are not reasons for me to give up on this medium. I feel like, as you were saying, the stricter we define those blurring lines, where they exist and where each film lives, the better it's going to be for these two very essential parts of our movie consumption to coexist together. And meanwhile, you said two words that just opened up a wound for me. You said First Man, and I get teary-eyed every time I hear those words. I wanted that movie to do much better. I was really happy it won something yesterday, it got visual effects, but I think it deserved a lot more.
Yeah, I liked it. I wasn't as big a fan as a lot of my peers.
Right.
Really, really, really loved it. But I guess it was something I had more respect for than passion for in that regard.
I hear that.
But yeah, that was. I felt bad. I felt bad for my friends that really just were so. That's like their number one film of the year, and they want it to do well, and it doesn't, and that's no fun. That's no fun when you're a really committed fan to see your favorite fall.
It was in my year-end top 5, and I know better than pushing up poor Damien Chazelle thing here. The guy is the youngest director Oscar winner, so nobody's ever going to feel bad for him, and I don't expect them to. But I thought that really was exceptionally well crafted, but the silver lining is I think he's shown, even if you're not passionate about what he does, that he's a great filmmaker. He can tackle an old-fashioned, candy-colored musical just as well as he can handle a space adventure and make it intimate all the same. So I look forward to seeing what he does next.
Absolutely. Well, Tomris, do you have any closing thoughts on this season and on the show?
I feel like there's one big moment, probably one of the biggest that we still haven't talked about. Best Actress.
Oh, I know we haven't really gone into like a whole lot of specifics other than like our favorites. No pun intended. Wins, but yes, okay. Let's go into Best Actress because oh my god. Okay.
Do you want to go first?
I will. Because it's really tough.
It is.
Even though I would have voted for Yeli to win, she was my favorite performance of the year. Period. Yeah, her nomination is a humongous reward and recognition.
It really is.
I loved Glenn Close in The Wife. I think that the film has some issues with lackluster B stories, and I think the past and present is a little too overused, and so there isn't anything enlightening about its use in this. But Glenn Close was just a powerhouse. She was wonderful. I think the role and performance represented basically the entirety of her career. And I know people can easily dismiss it and even her loss as, we shouldn't be giving career Oscar wins. That's what honorary Oscars are for. And I think there's a place in the middle where a great performance and a career recognition can exist. I mean, they've done it for Al Pacino and they've done it for Paul Newman. So to deny Glenn Close, I just thought was pretty savage. That said, Olivia Colman is so utterly flawless and so perfect in The Favorite that I have no complaints about that win. And her speech was amazing.
Her speech was truly amazing. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes, and she's really stunning in The Favorite. It's an instantly iconic performance, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just. It took me a while to watch The Wife, and I did see it before Oscar nominations were announced. But it's a movie a lot of people didn't see, in my opinion. It really is a movie that a lot of people did not see. But once I saw it, and once I kind of tried to engage with her performance, I started feeling really annoyed with everyone thinking about her probable Oscar nomination and eventual win as a career award, because I really thought she gave one of the strongest performances of this year, and it was really not an easy performance to give, because when you really look closely, it's all about, that performance is really all about holding back your grudge and then trying to negotiate with your anger and trying to sit with all the injustices that you've allowed someone to do to you, and then to try to kind of rise above that. Yeah. And that's the experience of a lot of women that I know personally, some in my family, and to nail that kind of subtlety about the inner battles that a woman of her age and of her status was dealing with, I thought was astonishing and exceptional. Yeah. I just really felt that people overdid that. Oh, if she won, she will be winning for a career and not necessarily this performance. And I couldn't help but wonder yesterday if that hurt a little bit. I feel like when a lot of people talk about a performance in that manner, Academy voters maybe felt like they were being forced fed a narrative, and they just didn't want to award a bad performance. But it was really an astonishing performance. But like you said, it's very hard to disagree with Olivia Colman's win either. It was just a really hard moment for me because I wanted Glenn Close to win, and it almost looked like even Olivia Colman would have felt better if she didn't have to deliver that speech. So I don't blame her. It was just really, really hard to see though, because she's 71 with Glenn Close. Her runner is a lot of work. You know.
Her reaction, just my heart sunk. It sunk.
Yeah,
it was.
I mean,
it was
you could see the reaction, but it was also very classy. It was, you know. It was as. I mean, you know, she just had to kind of gather up some of her performance from the wife and just hold it together in the face of tremendous anxiety and sadness and everything. Perfectly said. Yeah.
I felt so bad for her. So I don't know. I mean, yeah. But again, Coleman was amazing, and she made the right decision to go lead instead of supporting.
Indeed.
And,
I mean,
you know, otherwise we would not have Regina King as an Oscar winner, and I would not allow that.
That's very true. And, I mean, we talk about this, you know, category 4 thing every year, and there is definitely some validity in that conversation because if you have to pick one lead from the favorite, if you absolutely have to pick someone at some point, I would probably say Emma Stone is lead. But I am more willing to say that all three of those women are either lead together or supporting together. I can't really, you know, separate them. But it was strategically a good decision for Coleman to run in the lead, which opened the way for Regina King, as you said. Mm-hmm. And that allowed a Beale Street win, which was another great moment yesterday night.
Well, that's my favorite win of the night was Regina King's, and that it was the first award was it was really funny because it was really kind of setting me up for disaster because the first awards were so good, and Regina King was first, and I was like, oh my God, anything can happen.
I know, and she also had a lot of facts working against her.
Yeah.
You know. So
she defied tremendous odds to be able to win.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that she did. But in addition to feeling really bad about Romanov winning Best Picture, I ended up feeling really bad about Glenn Close not finally being an Oscar winner. But
I know.
What can you do?
I know. I hope Sunset Boulevard turns out to be her vehicle. Something. I can't imagine her going her entire life without winning.
I saw her in that role on stage, and you know, I'm very excited to see the screen version.
Yes, I am too. Well, I think that's a good place to let us go, and then we can marinate a little bit more on this, and listeners can as well.
Sounds good.
Tomris, thank you so much for being able to join me today and have some incredibly intelligent and cogent thoughts just the day after this crazy Oscars.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show and giving me actually a platform to process all these thoughts. It's almost easier when you're talking through them. with somebody.
I agree.
Just like sitting on your couch and tweeting away.
It is. It really is. And please tell my listeners again where they can find your work and find you on the internet.
You can read me on both Time Out New York and RogerEbert.com regularly, and occasionally I contribute to Vulture and some other outlets, and I tweet from @Tomris Laffly, TOMILAFFLY, and hopefully we can connect somewhere.
That's awesome. All right. Well, like I said, this is the last Oscar podcast of the 2018-29 season. So I want to thank my listeners and followers and everybody for putting up with me and persevering through this crazy season, and hopefully on to a much better one. And we'll see if that actually happens or not. Tomris, thank you again, and thanks everyone for listening. Bye.